says
Or it could be
really
Montreal.
surprising.
Oh, yeah.
She's in Paris.
I know, but I'm just saying, basically, if you can't afford to go to France, just go to Quebec. It's the same. Like, seriously.
No, Eiffel Tower.
That's okay.
I've
You can
seen-
see that in Las Vegas.
I've kind of visited around Quebec with my Oculus. It was by
So,
far the
tell
most
us.
interesting.
I totally want one of those.
Okay, you gotta tell us.
I've been trying to
When
tell
does
my
your next
husband
royalty
into
check
it.
arrive? When does your...
Yeah, you're gonna have $6,700 soon.
What?
PFDs. The PFD is going to get liquidated
What?
correctly.
Whoa,
You're
whoa,
gonna
whoa,
get
whoa,
people
whoa, whoa,
more
whoa.
money?
This is news to me.
Yeah,
What the heck's going on?
he's talking about using the formula that's in the Constitution, or is it the Constitution or whatever, Alaska's Constitution, and
Have we
bring
not
back-
been using
Is
the
this the
formula?
libertarian guy?
No, definitely.
Under Walker, the last 2 years, we've been ripped
No,
off.
I'm aware of that. Walker stole from us, but I didn't know that. Okay, this thing about. Okay, I'm sorry. Fill me in. Tell me more, because now I'm concerned and afraid.
Yeah,
Well-
so we missed out on money over the past
Right, we
3 or
got
4
money
years.
stolen from us under
Right.
Walker because he just made crap up and redid.
So he's talking about paying
repayment.
back the money that was lost over the
Yes!
past 3 or 4 years.
Thank
It's a
you.
plan. I don't think it's official, is it?
I'll believe it when I see it. Let me put
But-
it that way.
Well,
As
he's
far as
not-
I understand it,
He's not
that was
office
his
yet.
campaign promise,
Mhm.
and he's, once he was elected, there were two things that he said he was going to try to make happen right away. One of them was that,
Mhm.
so we shall see.
We shall see.
Yeah.
Basically, it comes across as he was bribing every voter in Alaska
That's what it
$6,700
I'm cool with that.
to vote for him instead of Vegas.
See, and now you understand what I was talking
Probably
about.
would have taken that and more, you know, so I was just, hey, there you go.
Yeah.
Well,
You
I
and your
mean,
husband and
I want Oculus.
raise
yeah.
children.
One
Although,
way-
if
one
I
way
had,
to
like,
interpret
vertigo
it-
issues, I wonder if it's not a very good idea. Do you think it would bother me? I don't understand. Really
It is
exactly
one
how it
thing that
works.
you can mind over matter. You can, plus
Maybe, like,
there's
when your brain
certain
gets
apps
used to
that will
sit down.
do
don't
that.
stand.
that I avoid because it's not every use will do that. So you get over
Uh-huh.
certain aspects.
But
of
it seems, is it similar to how space and distance?
Have you been to the Alaska
Remarkably-
Experience Theater?
Yeah.
So you put it on, and you feel like you're there.
Uh-huh,
Although of course you're in your living room.
right.
So if you start to move,
probably sit down
you're
is
going to
what I
bump
was
into
thinking.
the dog, or
Mhm.
knock your
Or the dog into you.
brandy over, whatever's in the room. But the prices are coming down, etc. You could try them at Best Buy.
My wife?
Yeah,
I think
I'll
on
do that.
Saturdays they have like the various kiosks with an attendant, so you could try them and see.
That'd be cool.
I forget that you can buy stuff in stores.
Yeah, there are brick and mortar places, at parking lots.
Whoa, totally. I saw one on my Oculus.
You can go to them all in your Oculus, but you know what? None of the cashiers will respond to you. You're just like,
They should make those where you can try on clothes and stuff.
They have
Well,
a
they do
program
have-
like
yeah, you
that,
can
actually,
try
they
them.
do. Yes, they do. They have a program where you can virtual reality try on clothes.
It's not like, an, avatar. It's not like an avatar that you
Correct.
can, like, dress
It
in.
actually shows you, and then it like superimposes the clothes onto you, and you look at yourself in the screen. And it's actually
That's cool.
pretty
my
interesting.
avatar doesn't really look like me. I tried, but
It's difficult to go clothes shopping.
yeah, they don't.
Too tiny
And
children.
the latest one wouldn't accept any of my photos, so I don't know what's wrong.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a little discouraging.
The first thing is you've got to upload a photo that's within these certain parameters so that then they could build the avatar on your. Uh-oh. What's Eliza just? Eliza. That was Eliza.
Who was Eliza?
I
Is that a
don't
new,
know.
Alexa or? No, friend.
Oh, she needs you. She's like, "Dad."
Yeah. She's all by herself down in.
Well, I sure hope we do
Nice.
get paid our PFDs back.
Okay,
That's
so
very
let's
upset about that.
move on. Sorry. So Hannah Arendt is my next topic. Eternity versus immortality. Basically, that's the difference between living, say, like a soul. That when you die, your soul lives for all eternity. That's the one theory. The other, immortality, well, that's if you have terrific health and never die, right? So you can see that difference is not too difficult. And when you get right down to it, most of us, I think, would prefer immortality to eternity. Eternity is the one where do you believe it? You're not going to know until, of course, the time comes. Immortality, on the other hand, is, well, I'm 67. That is pretty old compared to what humans traditionally managed. Our life expectancy has gone up, and that's because we've got nice medical care, especially retired military. I don't know about you, but I'm very happy with. They gave us over $1,000 worth of medicine just today because of all the medicines we got our prescriptions. I have no clue how much they are, but boy, medicines are expensive.
Only here.
Pardon?
Only here in the States.
They're not as expensive.
Yeah, in Canada or England or other places.
They're extremely cheap.
We don't.
The FDA is part of the problem, and the pharmaceutical corporations are another part of the problem.
Oddly, Trump is trying to do something about that in a way.
I'm
that
sorry,
no
did you
one
just
else-
say something not unkind about Trump? What?
He
I
doesn't say
feel like I
anything.
have a lot of neutral things to say, and some of those things turn out to be not unkind.
Humor.
Trump. On the other hand,
I'm just like,
sitting
who
right
are you
next
and what have you
to
done with
President Macron, who in perfectly good English expressed something that was very critical of a position Trump has taken, and Trump apparently didn't even understand that. So,
Is it the French
President Macron,
president who was getting after Trump for saying he was a nationalist?
nationalist, and Trump is, I mean, you could
I don't think
see.
you wanted to make a scene.
You can see it. Well, that could be. Okay, so Hannah Arendt, I've talked about her, right? Didn't I mention Frau Blücher?
Yes.
You did mention Crumble,
Yes.
and you showed us the
Yes,
the
yes. Sorry
thing
about
with
that.
young
But I
Frankenstein
showed
or
her,
something like that.
proof.
Bride of Frankenstein.
Her tombstone says Hannah Arendt
Mhm.
Blücher.
Yep.
So you've got that much. But if we look at more things about her, so she's German, Jewish. That's always a puzzle how to deal with that. My first thought, especially of friends that I have, is they're Americans. Or they're American citizens that were born in Germany. But even if I do discover, hey, their families were traditionally Jewish, they might not be Jewish religion or something. But does that make them Jewish? Well, I guess so. But there's always that ambiguity associated with on the one hand, you could be converted to be Jewish, so Ivanka has converted and is Jewish, right? Ivanka married Jared. Jared Kushner is Jewish, and in order to marry him, she first converted to Judaism, and then they got married in the synagogue. So, right? So Trump's son-in-law and his daughter are Jewish. But obviously, as far as I know, Trump's family is from, oh gosh, where was it from?
New York, America, United States.
No, they're from Europe,
No,
Eastern Europe.
he missed my point.
Might be Germany, I forget.
I listened to a podcast on him. Interesting that his father's name was, or middle name was Jesus.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But in any case, as far as I know, they're not Jewish. But so I'm very confused about that whole thing. I know when I did my DNA check, I hoped to discover that I was Ashkenazi or something, because they're brilliant people that live a long time, and I would hope to find out something like that in the hopes that that would be indicative of how long I might get to live a life. And frankly, I've always thought of myself as mediocre mentally. I'd love to be more brilliant, but I'm just lucky. So I've been able to compete with lots of people that are even more mediocre than me.
Well, that's kind of...
so I was near the top of my DLI class, but frankly, I wasn't competing against real heavyweights. They were all, just like me, basically. And my military classes, okay, it was pretty easy for me to be the head of the class, but everyone else was going out drinking at night, and I was going home and reading Michener.
See, that's just it.
In the barracks, or something. That, because I have different. I'm what do you call I believe the word is, I think this is English, right? Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So like you, people think that I am smart. I am not smart. And in fact, not only am I not smart, but I actually have multiple proven documented learning disabilities. But I study my ass off, and I have no life outside of
Keeps you
work and
thin.
school. So
Not.
my primary form of recreation
Don't
outside the
forget
home
to get up at
is
least
movies.
every half hour and do something. That's one reason why I think having a dog is a good thing. The dog will not just let you read all evening.
There
The
is
dog
science to
wants
support
do
that.
stuff. Yeah. Okay, well, so she's Jewish, German, but of course migrated to the United States after getting her PhD. Notice, born in Hanover, raised in Königsberg. She studied at the University of Marburg under Martin Heidegger, with whom she had a brief affair. Oddly, I've not heard it was brief. In fact, I believe it continued on many years later. In fact, I remember reading about how they met at a hotel after he had gotten out of, not sure he was actually in prison or just not allowed to do things for a few years after the war because of his role in the academic community. He did fire some Jewish professors as part of his being the head of the university. He was hoping to be sort of the genius behind Hitler's party, but discovered very quickly that they weren't going to listen to him at all. So he was going to have no influence, no restraining influence, no moral influence, and so he basically quit and ran. I believe he went to Toten-Amberg, where his house was. That I think we looked at. In any case, even after the war, as far as I understand it, she met him at a hotel, and Mrs. Heidegger was actually fine with that. So that's kind of odd, that they refer to it as a brief affair. Maybe that wasn't still an affair in that sense. But in any case, I remember Mrs. Heidegger, the only complaint she had with her was that she smoked too much. She smoked all the time. And Mrs. Heidegger didn't like that. So.
Well, the rest of the world sometimes has some different attitudes that don't always match with our American attitudes about mistresses and so forth.
Right, right.
So, I mean, what we may consider that horrible and immoral, and they maybe, whatever.
Oh, well, I remember one movie, Swedish movie. It was Alex and I forget, but it was about two children. It was one of those movies by the Bergman
Okay.
films, and the family was very rich, and part of the kind of tension was that the wife, and he had lots of children by his wife, but they were older, and his wife was older, but he also had a employee who worked for him in his coffee shop. He had lots of other businesses, but one of the businesses was a coffee shop, and the woman that he hired to run the coffee shop became his lover, and got pregnant. And the wife was very upset with him, not because he had a lover, etc., but he was upset with him because he wasn't doing enough financially to support her. Right? So the tension was, in a sense, just the opposite of what you'd expect, in a American modern situation where the wife would be mad with the husband for having an affair and mad at the woman for being encroaching on her, etc. Right? Instead, this was like the two women together fighting to get him to do his responsible.
In Sweden, the women can have misters. I mean,
So for Christmas, he gave her the coffee shop, and she was absolutely thrilled because that basically made her rich enough that she could afford her child and, etc. Right? So, in any case, that was just one movie. That was an interesting movie for lots of other reasons.
Scandinavia is the only place in the world where I have seen where I would say they have true, genuine gender equality. Scandinavia, very interesting place.
Yeah, I've heard that. Okay, so what else about her? As an American, I don't know under what circumstances she became an American citizen, but she did. I guess it would tell us down here. She escaped and made her way to the United States in '41 via Portugal. She settled in New York, which became her principal residence, although Bard College is slightly north of that. She became a writer and editor and worked for the Jewish Cultural Reconstruction, becoming an American citizen in 1950. And she's a writer, and so here's some of the books. The Origins of Totalitarianism, I'll read it from this wonderful Wikipedia article. Describes and analyzes Nazism and Stalinism, the major totalitarian political movements, etc. By the way, she recommends, because she doesn't think very highly of democracy, actually. I mean, I guess the concern she has is that it's not going to survive because it's inherently susceptible to popularism, or however you want to refer to that. In other words, what we've got. I think an awful lot of people look at what's going on right now and say, well, right now the government's being ruled by people that don't know what the heck they're doing, but those people were legitimately empowered by the electorate because the electorate doesn't know what they're doing, right? So we basically, elected, the fox to rule the hen house, not realizing that this was a fox, et cetera, so, and I mean, if you go back to the very beginnings of political theory, democracy was always described as not really the best form of government because there were so many weaknesses associated with it, and the problem of educating the voters so that they actually knew what the heck they should be voting for and not vote for benefits for themselves. As we just basically voted for someone who's going to give us all $6,700, not worried at all about,
Yeah.
well, where's that money actually, what damage will that, sudden, $2 billion worth of deduction from the state funds due to its growth for the future, et cetera, right? Plus Dunleavy's other arguments were that he would not tax anybody for anything. He would just cut, basically, in order to balance the budget, which means that he's going to do what? Cut
Well,
all the
there's a lot
services.
of waste
Cut
that can be
everything
cut.
that's, well, we'll see, right? We will see, because basically we were bribed into voting for him. I mean, not me in particular. By the way, every single thing I voted for lost last Tuesday, Tuesday a week ago, right?
I didn't vote, I bet in the stock market, I won so, oh man, I won so much money.
Good for you,
Yeah.
Good for you.
I won't know for, I only get my statement every quarter. I know I could go online and actually watch it every minute. And I think
That drives you
all that
crazy.
would do is turn me into an idiot.
Well, both of you are making me incredibly self-conscious and uncomfortable about my poverty. Thank you.
Well, I mean, when you're my age, if you haven't done these things, I don't know. That's not fair to folks that haven't had the opportunity, but university made me have a 401k. The Army made me have a retirement. The Social Security system made me have Social Security. So all the things that I'm thinking of that is accumulating for me
Well, I'm not blaming you. I'm just,
was actually
saying I'm jealous.
sitting there. It's like showing up, is basically all you need to do, and by the time you're my age, you've got all this stuff. So that's okay.
Well, maybe we should elect a government that will take it from you against your will by force and give it to me.
That's been done. Yeah.
It has, but they keep trying.
And that's the problem that you're alluding to with democracy, where 51% rule over 49.
The tyranny of the majority. It's the best of the worst of systems.
I thought our founding fathers were against that, though.
They are.
With certain
Well, they
things
literally
in place.
shot one of the advocates for that. That was Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. Burr shot Hamilton.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think of America as a democracy per se, I think of it as a republic.
That's because it is a republic.
A representative republic.
Yeah.
With
Well, her
democratic
argument
methods.
is that a better form of government, and this has not been tried, is that we have a council form of government where, no, I mean, this,
The presidency, like
the
Switzerland.
closest thing I can think of would be European models that, like
I like
the
that.
EU itself, or the UN perhaps. But the trouble with those, of course, is that they don't actually rule. They meet, discuss things, and not accomplish anything.
Well, I would be better off probably with the government that accomplished less, but also screwed me less, than one that accomplished more but screwed me more. Probably take the former over the latter.
The Swiss have an interesting form of
The
democracy.
cantons.
Well, their presidency is 7-seated, so the president is elected every 2 years, but it's a different seat of the presidency. And then their heads, it's a council basically. The presidency is a council, it's an administrative council of 7 different people. And they also have they have more localized control versus overall centralized control, whereas the borough, for instance, in Alaska would have more power than the federal government in terms of regulating its
That was
territories.
Jefferson's idea.
Yeah.
Jefferson was on that side, and Adams and Hamilton were on the opposing sides, and Madison, which one? No, I'm forgetting which one Madison was on. Madison was with Jefferson.
Our founding fathers actually
And they
mentioned.
actually lived right across the street from one another almost.
Right.
It's farther than a street, because it's one estate and another estate. So you have to drive around the loop, get to the highway, and then take the exit right across, and then that takes you down to Ashlon, I think, is Madison's estate. Monticello's on the one side, and it was Ashlon, I'm pretty sure. Ashlon? Now I've got to look it up. I'm sorry.
Your example of Switzerland's interesting. The founding fathers actually spoke with great admiration on multiple occasions of Switzerland. In fact, one of the quotes was
Was
something
that Monroe?
referencing the Second Amendment, actually, and saying that
That's Monroe.
amongst the kingdoms of Europe, except for the Swiss, they are disarmed, or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Or the Swiss have the advantage of being armed.
Yeah.
Look at these.
Because everybody serves in the military.
Oh, those are slick.
And then
They
keep
do.
their
They
military.
have a traditional militia system. Yes.
Highland augmented reality experience.
Wow.
Awesome.
Looks
Switzerland's
like
very interesting, very unique.
modified version of the Oculus, actually.
Much lighter, I assume.
Looks
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. Well, I don't find it heavy.
No?
It looks bulky, but it just fits. The only thing is, if I've had it on for like an hour and I take it off, I've got these deep rivets in my cheeks, which make me look weird, I suppose. Okay, well, I'm not doing a good job here with Anna.
We keep distracting you.
Well, that's pretty
Important-
easy. I don't know.
important data.
Okay, so Eichmann in Jerusalem. This was, I suppose, the most famous aspect of everything she did, and that's Eichmann was the Nazi who ran the Holocaust, the trains, the factories, the ovens, the selection process, the crematoria, all that stuff. Eichmann was the individual that did that. At the end of the war, he escaped somehow. I don't know how did all these Nazis get to Argentina? And it's not just Nazis, because that's also where Trotsky was when he was killed, wasn't it? Or was that Mexico?
I think it was in Mexico.
In Frida Kahlo's house. He was murdered, I think, right in front of her, actually.
That's in Argentina then.
That is in Argentina. That's just one of the weird things about her. I
What was
guess.
the name of that movie just recently about the Israelis capturing
I
Eichmann
haven't seen
in
that.
Argentina? I saw it and it was fantastic, but I can't remember the freaking name of it. But it was an absolutely fantastic movie.
Watch, I can't even spell Trotsky. I did not have a nap. So he's, a red hot lover. So that's terrible.
It's still funny though.
So it is Mexico. However, from what I understand, somebody hit him in the head with, I think, an axe in her dining room or something, where he was sitting. So Stalin got him. Trotsky was a Menshevik, or was it Lenin? Gosh, I'm sorry, I'm having all these brain blanks. Was it Lenin that sent the hit squad to kill him instead of Stalin? Because
That says that Stalin was his spark rival.
so Stalin. Oh, okay.
I think it was Stalin. Personal beef with him.
Yeah. Trotsky was a Menshevik. Of course, the party that won was the Bolshevik. Bolshevik means the large. Menshevik means the smaller. And basically what it meant was that the Bolshevik party believed that the communist leadership should have a large role over the directions of the country, whereas the Menshevik believed that they should have less. So that, in other words, the people have more power, communist leadership less, and Lenin believed the opposite.
So you want to see some interesting differences of opinion on interpretations of communism, looking at the schism between the Soviet Union and China that occurred in the 60s, and their argument about, communism and its application is quite interesting.
Okay, so, in any case, back to Anna. So, she was a reporter chosen to go and sit in on the trial of Eichmann, and several of her writings, including her reports to the newspaper, but the main one was Eichmann in Jerusalem, report on the banality of evil. And so that was her phrase that has since become famous, the banality of evil. What was her intention there? Her impression of Eichmann was that he was just like one of us, basically. And he had a job, and his job was to do these horrible things. And he was really good at it. And he just hoped that he would get promoted. And it never really occurred to him that what he was doing was evil. He had probably thought he was doing a good job, and that since Hitler wanted this done, that this was a good thing to do. So he probably didn't have that kind of moral intuition that killing all these people is a bad thing. And so she reported it this way, basically saying that he's not like, what we would maybe today compare to Voldemort or something. He's not an evil person. He was a normal, everyday one of us that, in fact, he was kind of, anal in some ways, I suppose. That he wanted to do such a good job. He was really good at, making sure that the system was very efficient and things of that sort. And in court, it came out, that, he was really a numbers kind of guy. Really just, doing a good job of making sure, so it wasn't like he was thinking these are people that he's putting on the trains and shipping, to these, arranging for all the supplies and so on. By the way, the officers that were in charge of this whole thing were never pressured in the sense that if you didn't do such and such, you'd be shot. The people in the camps were in that kind of pressure. So like if you were one of the ones with the machine gun or whatever weapon, and the people were all lined up in front of you and they say fire, and if you hesitated, you could be shot. But that was because, of course, that they had to have that actually happen, right away. All the bodies had to be thrown into the graves, etc. Right? So all of that had to happen without any hesitation on the part of the people that were there. And they had specific days off that would give people time to kind of recoup their humanity so that they could go back and be efficient again the next day and so on. But So any argument that basically you had to do it or they would kill you only occurred at the lower echelons of the people that were actually doing that sort of thing. People up at the top that were running the whole organization, like Eichmann, was basically trying to be a good bureaucrat, and he was never really in that danger, so he could never really defend himself by saying that he only did his job because they would kill him if he didn't. That was never a defense for people at that level. Of course, they hung him. They found him guilty of all of that, and but I mentioned that the odd thing was that so many people hated her for what she said in her honest reporting of the trial. That was pretty strange, that for her to refer, it was like the Jewish community wanted to know that this guy was evil incarnate. And for her to say, no, he's just like you and I, just doing his job, just so happened that he was killing all these people. And that was highly offensive to the people that, had, tattoos, I suppose, all you imagine, lost people. She lost people too, I think. I don't know how you would avoid it, right? But she is best remembered for the controversy surrounding the trial of Adolf Eichmann. He was executed by hanging.
National Socialist German Workers' Party. Socialism. Nazi.
Did you know that your ISP can see all of your Kodi streaming activity and all of your other online?
Yes. Most of our lives we are not fully at home. If we spend so much of our efforts in seeking consolation,
So I've mentioned Roger Scruton before and pointed out that I've only recently discovered, I don't know why, he's been writing and publishing for quite some time. But the more I read about him, the more impressed I am. I've never heard him say anything that I disagreed with. Is that weird? I mean, I usually try to find something to disagree with someone, and yet he's amazing to me.
Maybe you and him are like Confucius and Aristotle.
Inspiring us, so that there's a need in all of us to come.
I think he's an exceptional contemporary philosopher.
And I take it that's what we
I'm
mean
just
by
Joe
conception,
Snuffy, living in Anchorage.
if you like, transcendental
River.
homecoming from all the bitterness and fragmentariness about
I
what
get to annoy the heck out of about maybe 30 people a year or something.
being with the world.
Some of them like you sometimes.
That we don't normally
well.
possess.
Being at peace with the world itself.
Being at peace
But
with the
so,
world itself and therefore
what's the
with
connection
ourselves.
here?
Now, it's very easy to see in this, of course, the inherited.
I guess the main tie-in from this interview is just part one of, this is episode 2, notice. But as you listen to this, the main theme between them is the nature of beauty. So, if we're thinking in terms of the banality of evil, what about beauty? Is beauty, and by the way, he's advertising the beauty of riding horses, the hunt. That's one of his fun things to do. I don't know if you ever ridden horses or anything.
We have.
Quite a lot, yeah.
We are not only the only animals that
But
make
he's talking about
conservation,
the
only animals
relationship
with
you have with the
sense.
animals.
The only animals who have a conception that life on this world is in some way incomplete, needs to be completed by something. Even in this irreligious and pagan age, this desire to complete our life here with something that is, as it were, not here but beyond, is just as strong. Of course, it expresses itself in other ways, perhaps in ways that we wouldn't naturally approve of, but nevertheless it's always there. And to understand our desire for consolation, I think one must look into the roots of the religious sense. And to me, this... Should I stop there just for a minute?
No, just come on.
Yeah?
We're talking about religion and consolation in the religious sense.
Right. Yeah.
He also
The
likes
roots
cigars.
of religion lie obviously very deep in us.
I'm not sure I
There
agree
is,
with that,
in
actually.
all of us, this need
Never been able to
to
inhale.
establish a connection with something greater,
understand.
something which is not me,
He's very British.
Clinton and
that
that.
is not you,
You're not supposed to inhale
that
cigars.
in some way comprehends us both.
And being a part of a universal drama.
Perhaps being that,
One of the main characters playing in it.
yes, being part of a drama, but also the drama of one's own life, but also united with others in a community which is, as it were, beyond the living, beyond the community of the merely living, which absorbs us into the full epoch of the species, including the dead and the unborn. And this is something that modern people in particular hunger for, because they have been, as it were, nomadized by their civilization. They've been set in motion by, first of all, the ease of movement from place to place, the ease of movement from one emotional relationship to the next, the ease of movement simply from room to room and from thought to thought, from entertainment to entertainment. Nothing stills them or keeps them in one place for long enough. And yet, all the time that this movement is occurring, the hunger is growing more and more urgently within them to bring it to a stop, or to stand back and be at one with things, be where they are, resting, dwelling in the land, as Heidegger would have put it, attached to the place which is theirs, and at peace with the people who are theirs.
Something I forgot to mention when we were looking at the native language groups, the elders meeting in Juneau this week, as I was watching and listening to a translate, so the one elder was speaking, and a translator that I couldn't see was on the mic and saying what, so I could hear both of them, but I could clearly hear what the translation was as the elder was speaking, and I think it was Jamison, or however you say it. But as he was speaking, I was incredibly bored with what he was saying. His story was slow. I was talking about an elder he was an elder, but he was talking about an elder who was saying giving a story, talking about the bear in the woods, was really loud, etc. And as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, of course, in terms of all the arguments I've ever been involved with, over differences in learning approaches and things, because of course we have lots of different kinds of folks in our classrooms here, and it's pretty clear to me that for the most part those that are native tend to not say things in class. They might after class come up and ask me something. They're very shy about it. I remember especially one woman coming up, and I've been talking about meta-narration and how important that is for your sense of value and your desire to live, right? That you want to accomplish a role and so on. That without a meta-narrative, it's pretty dangerous because you've got basically no reason to live, right? And she came up and she wanted to talk about that, and she says she knew someone who had died, and what I gathered from the way she went about it, but she didn't want to come straight out and say what it was, but that she knew people who had committed suicide from her family, and she wanted to know more about this idea. Right? But that she literally was a person, not an elder. I've known some elders, had elders in my class actually, but she was more middle-aged, but she was very concerned about this and wondering, and I've often wondered, how would psychologists use this? Don't they have this thesis about the nature of meaning in our lives, etc.? It's something that they think about, and can't they talk to people about that so that people realize that if they feel like there's nothing worth living for, that they're having a narrative problem? What you ought to do is sit down and discuss the nature of the human beings, that we need meta-narratives to believe in, and that you're feeling like life is worthless, and the reason you're thinking that way is a learning problem. You can fix this by studying meta-narratives and finding one that will absolutely invigorate you. And it could be the same thing with joining the military. Why would you join the military? I want to go out and save the world. I love the commercials. The commercial shows the person on the helicopter rescuing people. I can do this. I'm saving my community. Plus, I'm getting money for college. All that stuff is absolutely great for building someone's reason for going to do this. Right?
I am getting paid to go to school right now.
I mean, it's very powerful stuff, right? It doesn't say, "Hey, we've got a meta-narrative for you." That probably wouldn't work, But when you're thinking about the difference in the language, the vocabulary is clearly less. English is one of the largest vocabulary. Plus, if you start thinking about all the sub-language groups, there's all these extra words that you can go learn, that, my goodness, it's just an incredibly rich environment, whereas a very small language group that's perhaps even dying out, has only a relatively small vocabulary, I would imagine. But also the mindset and how they're thinking, it's a pace that is much slower than what you're encouraged to think at, say, in a UAA classroom, right? That's one of the problems that teachers are concerned about with students, say native students that come in and they're not used to the learning pace, the speed at which we're doing everything, right? How fast can you think? In fact, if you join a club like the debate teams, they practice. If you ever listen, my office was just down the hall from them in the admin building. For many a night, I've heard them in there going, and how fast, and then they do breakout sessions and they go and they literally practice and so on. And by the way, that's all good for you in this kind of a competitive society. I know some of the ones that left that group went on, and one of my students just finished negotiating with the school district for the new contract. I haven't seen what they've gotten, of course, because it hasn't come out yet, and they're going to have to vote on it and so on. But she was on Facebook and talking about how much time she was spending and how late she was up. So here's once I take a look, I'm happy to talk with anyone who has questions, because she was one of the negotiators. Thank you to everyone who has shown their support for the bargaining team, et cetera, et cetera. So she was one of the fastest talkers I've ever heard in my life. That's just absolutely amazing, but the system taught her to be fast, to go out there and give us, a fast, by the way, she was the student president, her junior year, and she was the, which vice president the year before that? I forget. Vice president the year before that, president the following year. She quit the last year because she wanted to concentrate on her studies. But, she just dominated in every, competition that she took. Went on to get her a graduate degree, and she teaches in the local school district, and obviously for some reason she was selected to be one of the negotiators in this, contract negotiations, etc. But there's an example. This one is this person is a person which just thinks so fast, very competitive, very brilliant, excellent all the way. Put that next to someone who's coming from a village and thinking very slowly. Okay, are we talking different educational styles, learning styles? Some of my colleagues, we've talked about, I don't listen, they say, because I think I mentioned this as a person is talking to me, I'm kind of logging, okay, so that's a premise, there's the conclusion. Is that conclusion supported by these premises? Oh, here's a mistake. And then as soon as that person shuts up, my question is, and I'm going to aim at that mistake, right? That's competition, modern American style, right? That's debate form, et cetera, right? Where we do that. That's wrong. You're not listening to the person. If you're preparing they'll criticize you for that. They'll say, you're not listening to the person when what you're doing is trying to think of what you're going to say next. And I'm thinking, that's how you listen. Right? And so in a sense, my feeling is you are not learning if you're not doing this. So just sitting there and absorbing what? What are you absorbing? What am I missing? Okay, well, so maybe this kind of a comparison. You're in a society where you're running a race around the track. And how fast you get around that track compared to the other people that are racing is whether you win or lose. Whether you're going to be hired or not, right? Whether you're going to get, the promotion or not, et cetera, right? That's the competitive environment we're in. Granted, we call it a rat race because it's stressful, because you're constantly running this race, right? Now maybe, the native culture wants to walk around the track and enjoy seeing the flowers, notice the ants crawling across the track, and they're much more relaxed, they're enjoying their walk, they're having a nicer time. That's a totally different way of enjoying life than being in the rat race. And I understand that difference. But of course, in our educational system, most of the people that are here are so that they can get jobs, so that they can compete in the rat race. But it's one of the reasons why, of course, everybody's encouraged to do more and more. Each time you go up a course level, from 100 to 200 to 300 to 400 to 600, what's supposed to happen is that the teacher's supposed to make it more and more difficult. You have to do more stuff in less time, more stresses. Why? Because the real preparation is for you to get out there and be in a stressful environment that you are now prepared for and have demonstrated you can handle, right? Not to be relaxed and enjoy life, because that's not the way it's going to be when you get out there, right? I've got to come up with a good quiz question, because theoretically we're done.
You don't have to. You did mention in the syllabus that there will be some classes without quiz questions. So you could do one on occasion and or none.
Initially,
on
I thought what
occasion.
you were going to say is, I don't have to finish now. Then I realized,
Hey, at least you know
I
I
don't
read
have to
the
give you a
syllabus.
quiz question.
Hey, at least you know I read the syllabus.
But I should give you a quiz question.
You don't have to. You
No, but
don't.
I want it to be a good, thought-provoking.
I actually do have enough work and enough things to do, believe it or not. I
Those are
also
easy
conversely
questions.
have a shortage of time.
Takes me all 10 minutes to write my responses usually.
Well, some of your responses are quite thought-provoking too. So I think you think longer than that, but
Yeah, maybe it just seems like 10 minutes to me.
Well, it's maybe 10 minutes to write and 30 minutes to think of.
well, I think Roger Scruton is arguing that we've got to get back to all of that we're missing all of the beauty of the connection with horses, for example. I mean, he's not enjoying he's retired now, living on his ranch in England, a farm, calls it a farm, not a ranch. He's got horses, at least the one that he goes and uses in his hunting, which, as far as I know, they don't actually succeed in hunting anything. It's not like everybody goes out and gets to shoot things. The whole thing is you're riding around on a horse with a bunch of other people that come to ride a horse with the dogs and the huntsmen and all that. It probably would be fun if you could ride a horse and stuff. But the smell of the leather, and he's talking about the beauty of all of the experiences.
Sounds like mindfulness. Sorry. Sometimes you just interrupt you. I don't mean to.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it sounds like mindfulness. Like
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And the natives are that way too. I mean, what they're trying to say is, our society doesn't have any time for that. In a way, I mean, so how do you deal with the lack of connection, I suppose, to the earth?
quiz question.
Yeah, how do you deal with the lack of connection? I mean, if you have children, boy, that's a connection to the earth. When the kid spits up all over and you have to clean it up, that's a deep connection to the earth. I know my dog is a great way for me to be connected to the earth, especially when she knocks me down.
So how do you deal with the lack of connection to the earth?
In our stressful environment.
Modern society.
But
In our
I
modern
suppose
society.
I should have tried to tie the language into that too, because our language is part of that. Sorry, I don't have a good, clear way of addressing this question. These are the kinds
We
of
forgive you.
issues, though, that I'm thinking about. We're looking at the socially constructed reality. We see competition between different social constructions. The natives are expressing their concern because the larger socially constructed reality is imposing and destroying what they have. And they obviously recognize values in what they're losing and trying to fight for it. It's a losing battle. Even their own youth are not staying with them, but are much more attracted to a more competitive model, or they die.
You were mentioning earlier about your African psychology looked at me, and it struck a memory chord within me. Somebody had mentioned this guy, Jordan Peterson,
Oh, I like your computers.
and his book is called, his first book is called Maps of Meaning, Architecture of Belief, which is exactly on point with what you're talking about, in that without some sort of meaning, and Nietzsche suggested this too,
Viktor Frankl,
without some sort of meaning, we don't have.
Carl Jung.
Right, yeah, and Peterson was
Joseph
largely
Campbell.
influenced by Jung. Without meaning, we seem to think that life is superfluous, and
Are you okay?
there's no
Yeah,
purpose to
hold
it.
on.
Those are on YouTube too.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of.
Good night.
Have a good evening.
And have a good